Welcome everyone to the SARDI Dialogue series. We are so glad you could join us today. My name is Komal Bazaz-Smith. I am the Project Director for the Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership Initiative from USAID. This initiative is a suite of projects run through USAID, implemented by DAI, and SARDI is one of those projects. Let me first do a quick run through the agenda. First, we will hear opening remarks from Mary Tyler Holmes, the Deputy Director of the Indo-Pacific Office. I will then talk a little bit about SARDI and tell you a little bit about the exciting work that we're doing. We will then hear from a series of government and private sector experts and thought leaders, including a panel discussion on cybersecurity concerns and opportunities for MSMEs. Throughout, we will be asking you to participate in polls that will ask you to analyze and apply the insights you've heard from each speaker. We encourage you to send questions in the chat function throughout the event, and we have folks capturing those questions. We will do our best to respond to each and every one of them during the Q&A, and if we don't, we're very happy to for you to reach out to us after the webinar so that we can continue the discussion. The second webinar in the series, which will focus on last mile connectivity, will take place next week at the same time, and we encourage you to join us. If you haven't had a chance to register yet, you can do so by clicking the link provided in the chat. We will also resend the link at the end of today's program. Our USAID colleagues will conclude the event, and please watch for follow-up after the webinar, where we will be sending you the SARDI fact sheet and information on how to engage and partner with us. I will also take a moment to introduce our Facilitator of Events, Christy Koster, who is part of our DAI team, managing SARDI's cross-regional and Bangladesh initiatives. I have the honor of introducing Mary Tyler Holmes. Ms. Mary Tyler Holmes is the Deputy Director of USAID's India's Indo-Pacific Office, overseeing a budget of $140 million. Ms. Holmes has served in education and democracy and governance roles in postings in Africa, the Balkans, and South and Central Asia, as well as in Washington. Ms. Holmes has over 20 years of experience in the international development sector in strategic planning, project design and implementation, organizational change management, assessments and evaluations, human and institutional capacity building, international religious freedom, and human rights, as well as civil-military cooperation. Ms. Holmes has led key strategies for USAID, established a sector council on strategic religious engagement, and has regularly engaged with counterparts at the NSC, Department of Defense, and the Department of State, as well as international donors and bilateral governments on representing USG priorities. Prior to her USAID experience, Ms. Holmes worked at the US Department of State, the US Senate for Senators Bill Nelson and Edward Kennedy, as well as USAID implementing partners. Ms. Holmes obtained her MA in International Education and Development from the George Washington University in 2006, and her BA at the American University in International Relations and Chinese Studies in 2000. She matriculated in Jingmao University in Beijing, China, and studied Mandarin. She also obtained a certificate in counterterrorism from Department of Defense Joint Strategic Operations University. Ms. Holmes speaks fluent Farsi and Dari, as well as basic Mandarin and Arabic. She is married to Visar Kelmendi and considers Montana home. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the event. Mary, I'll hand it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. We're honored to have you all here today. To our speakers, thank you for taking the time to address this group this evening, and we look forward to your insightful comments. India represents a vibrant digital environment that holds key lessons for many other nations within the Indo-Pacific region and beyond that are looking to move small businesses to a new digital age. USAID recognizes the efforts by the government of India to digitally transform the ecosystem of government services. These initiatives make life better for Indian citizens as well as small businesses. We are truly fortunate to have with us today architects and implementation experts from across the government of India who can share their experiences building digital infrastructure. First, we will hear from Ms. Alka Arora, Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises. She has championed reforms for inclusive procurement, the use of technology platforms in the supply chain, and the role of women entrepreneurs in the economy. Next, Mr. Abhishek Singh will speak. Mr. Singh serves as President and CEO for the National E-Governance Division of the Government of India, as well as the CEO and Managing Director of Digital India Corporation. Both these bodies have helped lead digital initiatives that improved economic opportunities for millions of small businesses across the whole of India. Finally, this evening, we'll hear from the Government of India's Mr. Ashish Abrol, who serves as Commissioner of Income Tax with the National Faceless Assessment Center. He has been instrumental in introducing wide-ranging innovations in the way businesses interact with the government. Thank you to our implementing partner, DAI, as well for their leadership in this area. Just to give you all an overview and a brief introduction to the Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership, or DCCP, the Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership is a U.S. whole-of-government initiative that was launched in July of 2018. Its primary focus is to promote an open, inclusive, reliable, and secure internet. Build partnerships, cybersecurity capacity to address shared threats through engagement with the private sector, government, and civil society, and make citizens and small and medium-sized enterprises more digitally savvy and safe from cyber threats. A brief introduction as well to SARDI. The South Asia Regional Digital Initiative, better known as SARDI, aims to improve digital connectivity, digital literacy, and cybersecurity in the South Asia region. According to the data from the Confederation of Indian Industry, micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, account for more than 40% of India's manufacturing output and over 45% of total exports. Given the central role they play in the digital journey many MSMEs still have before them, the key focus of SARDI is to support MSMEs in the digital transformation of their operations, with programs currently underway in Haryana and Madhya Pradesh. The SARDI Dialogue Series intends to enhance the ability of MSMEs to participate more fully and safely in the digital economy and raise awareness amongst them regarding cyber policies. We're so pleased to have speakers from both the private sector who can shed light on how the new digital environment will impact the future of India's small businesses. Specific to today's discussion, we'll be taking a deep dive into the issue of cybersecurity and the emerging trends within that sphere, as so many businesses consider how to increase digitization, especially in light of changes induced by the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope to continue our dialogue with thought leaders, policymakers, industry experts, and others in the region to share their thoughts, experiences, and resources on cybersecurity for MSMEs as they move forward on their digital journey. Thank you all for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Mary Tyler, for those remarks and for joining us today. As Komal mentioned, my name is Christy Koster. I'm a program manager working with the SARDI team. I'm so pleased to see all of you joining us for this webinar. I'm now going to invite Komal back to the stage, and she will talk a little bit about the South Asia Regional Digital Initiative and why it is so important.
Thanks so much, Mary and Christy. Hi again, everyone. My name is Komal Smith, and as I mentioned before, I lead a suite of projects that fall under the larger umbrella of the Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership Initiative, DCCP. DCCP is an interagency initiative that is chaired by USAID and the State Department and works with partner countries to support the development of communications infrastructure, promote transparent regulatory policies for open, competitive markets, and build partner cybersecurity capacity to address shared threats through engagement with the private sector, government, and civil society. DCCP is now active in over 18 countries and is implementing over $20 million worth of activities and continues to grow. SARDI is one of those projects and works across the South Asia region. We work to find ways to engage a wide variety of users' voices in the development of our policies, as well as working with our target groups in the SME, CSO, private sector, and academic sector to become more digitally savvy and cyber safe by increasing public awareness to engage on digital policy issues in ways that are meaningful to them across the various projects that we work on across the globe. SARDI works towards improving digital connectivity in the South Asia region and strengthening the private sector and civil society's digital capacity and their ability to engage on digital and ICT policy issues. We do this by working across 3 different levels of activities: digital connectivity, digital upskilling, and policy engagement. For example, we're working to support digital upskilling across the region. SARDI's upskilling work focuses specifically on women-led organizations and micro and small businesses. developing curriculum that enables them to connect online, earn their livelihoods through digital or e-commerce platforms, market their products, protect themselves against cyber and disinformation threats, and expand their clientele. On the policy engagement side, our activities focus on awareness raising and advocacy skills building for urban youth and women-led small and medium enterprises and civil society organizations. They work to help them translate digital policies into action. The focus of this work is helping them SMEs and CSOs better understand, comply with, take advantage of, and think critically about the technology policy environment which governs their businesses and organizations' actions, while also trying to develop their skills to advocate and articulate opinions about key ICT policy issues. There are laws being developed around cybersecurity, 5G, data localization, data protection, data governance, etc. And each of these laws have implications for their SMEs and CSOs. The awareness raising and advocacy skill development hopes to create a platform to enable the target SMEs and CSOs to operate more efficiently and effectively, to advocate for policies that work with them and for them with the support of industry associations, take advantage of beneficial public incentives and programs while complying with all of the policy guidelines. We will also collaborate closely with the private sector to expand the reach of digital governance initiatives and to leverage their catalytic role in bridging the digital gender divide. This work hopes to create a strong feedback loop to the policymakers to inform them of the real life impact of the digital policies on the micro and cottage industries that make up the bulk of the businesses in the region. This is the precise focus of today's webinar and what we hope will be the initiation of this feedback loop and conversation. On the digital connectivity side of things, many regional governments are demonstrating commitment and understanding that enabling digital access and last mile connectivity will propel inclusive social and economic well-being across the society. For example, the government of India recently approved a framework for the proliferation of public Wi-Fi networks through the PM Wi-Fi Access Network interface, the PM-WANI scheme. This initiative aims to elevate wireless internet connectivity in India by leveraging the public Wi-Fi network for delivery of broadband services. SARDI is implementing an activity strengthening the last mile delivery of broadband services by training women entrepreneurs, CDOs, and women self-help groups on how to take advantage of the PM-WANI scheme and become providers themselves of Wi-Fi services to their businesses and communities at large. This will increase the beneficiaries' digital capacity, strengthen and build their organization's capacities in digital services, and improve connectivity and access for these women and their communities. In addition, women who own, manage, and operate internet services for communities greatly benefit from increased long-term livelihood skills and market opportunities, which in turn increase their standing in their communities. This work will be the focus of next week's webinar, and we hope that you can join us for that as well. In each of these three activities, we push to ensure that there is a constant feedback and connection points across these types of activities, so that we're not only working to achieve goals in each of the three focus areas, but we're also ensuring that the work helps enable and mutually reinforces what we're doing in all of the areas. In this way, we work to build a strong digital ecosystem that improves digital connectivity in the South Asia region, strengthening the private sector and civil society's digital capacity to capitalize on the opportunities and mitigate against cyber risks and threats that digital transformation presents, and empowers them to engage more effectively on ICT policy issues. We invite you to join us in this work, and we really do hope that you contact us. And now back to Christy for the next piece in our event.
Thank you so much, Komal. It is wonderful to hear all of the work that SARDI is doing in the digital sphere. Now I'm pleased to announce our next session, Viewpoint on Challenges and Opportunities from the Ministry of MSME. And for this discussion, please join me in welcoming Mr. Satvinder Singh, Managing Director of NITCON Limited, to the virtual stage.
Yes, thank you, Christy. I am honored to share this stage with Madam Alka Arora, Joint Secretary, Ministry of MSME, Government of India. Madam Alka Arora is presently serving as Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, Government of India since July 2017. She is the key personality in administering the policy for MSMEs in the country and handling number of MOUs in the MSME sector on an international level. An officer belonging to the Indian Defence Account Service, Madam has more than 30 years of experience in finance, administration, and she worked in the number of assignments with defense, cottage, artisans, as well as textiles. She was appointed even as a full-time with the Cottage Emporium and worked as integrated financial advisor to the Western Air Command and Army Hospital. So what I can say from these words, she has a versatile experience from defense to artisans to the cottage and now to the MSME. Madam Alka Arora possesses the Masters in Science, Analytical Chemistry from renowned Institute of Technology, Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. Besides this Joint Secretary as the Ministry of MSME, which is a very responsible post, she is also holding the additional charge as Chairman and Managing Director of National Small Industries Corporation, which is one of the mini Ratna central public sector enterprise for the development and growth of MSMEs. So we can say that she knows MSME ins and out. She always takes MSME to the next leap always. And since I have privilege to work with her, she is always keen to take up the challenges and putting a step forward for taking new initiatives for the development and growth of MSMEs. Madam, I, on behalf of USAID and myself, welcome to this webinar. As we all are aware that MSMEs in India are having presence in all sectors for manufacturing and services, and actively working towards the digital empowerment. Because nowadays these MSMEs are seriously looking for automation in process engineering, automations in their existing working on supply chain management, and digital empowerment is already going on. In their digital transformation, the cybersecurity aspect cannot be ignored. We would like your views on the cybersecurity aspect in context of MSMEs. Since you are dealing with clusters, all MSMEs associations and other, your viewpoint, I believe, would be very important and informative for the participants. Thank you very much. And please, Madam Alka Arora, please say with your viewpoints. Thank you.
Good morning and good evening. Thank you. It's indeed an honor and pleasure to be here today. Thank you for the kind words which Mr. Satvinder Singh has spoken about me, myself, and the kind of work we are doing at the ministry. So first of all, I would like to make the gathering here aware that a lot of work has been happening on the digital front for the MSMEs. And during the global pandemic, it made us realize in the ministry that the MSMEs, though we have been working on their various fronts, MSMEs were the most hit during the pandemic. And apart from their financial hardships which they were facing, there was also the world had suddenly become, it had come together. And if you were not on any e-commerce platform, then you found it very difficult to sell your product. So we have been having a scheme in the ministry for quite some time, which is on the lines of the Digital India initiative. But during this 1.5 years, during the pandemic period, we've had many webinars where we have been discussing and trying to make our micro sector, which was the worst affected, to take part of the advantages of the digital literacy and move ahead by joining and taking advantage of the various digital schemes which the ministry was offering. And I would like to also inform everybody here that during this period, there was a fair which was organized by various ministries where it was under the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji's leadership, which was about the toy. So there is a lot of work which has been going on the Indian toys, whether it is under the traditional toys or the new age toys. But what we realized for the MSMEs, we had many MSMEs, or especially the micro sector, which was making a lot of traditional toys, but they had never photographed a product. And here, happy to announce that around 350 MSMEs participated in this fair. For the first time, we helped them in making, photographing their products and also arranging a website for them and trying to make them aware that what is this world about. When we talk about the e-commerce platforms, we have been working in the ministry. We have the Khadi and the village industries vertical also working very closely, because a lot of micro sector is in that area, the village and the agro industries. So we have made two websites for them and tried to connect all the village industries to supply on these with the Khadi showrooms and the outlets which we have. And NSIC, the National Small Industries Corporation, which I'm holding the charge for some time now, there also we have come up with the e-commerce platform, which is a B2B platform where we are trying to connect the different manufacturing sector. So the MSME sector encompasses the village and Khadi industries, the oil industry, which also comes under our ministry, as well as the manufacturing and the services sector. Also, since last year, we realized that the women who form a very, very important component of the sector are sometimes more scared of coming onto the digital platforms. So we did a program with She Trades, and many of the women who were already doing good business, if they had a good turnover, they were selected to a contest. And with the help of She Trades, we tried to take them to another level. So the ministry at different platforms, we have the technology centers where we are providing, we have 18 technology centers and 20 more are coming up across the country, and another 25 on the hub and spoke model are coming, which are already providing digital literacy in different kinds of courses. And there is also the NSIC has their training centers. When we are talking about digital literacy, as the topic for today is about the cybersecurity, it becomes very important for the MSMEs. So far, the ministry has been trying to make them onboard these platforms. There has been some kind of hesitancy at various levels till you explain to them what are the benefits. And cybersecurity is another area where we are having the discussions, and many of the IITs and other schools, the business schools have also started working with the ministry. The new scheme, we have come up with a champions portal where we are using ourselves the real time, where the grievances of the MSME sector, the small companies, we are trying to educate them in the real-time basis. And also in this year, we are coming up with different thoughts that how do we make them aware. The idea is to educate them first on what are the risks of, and if they are not aware of the cybersecurity, because this is not perceived by most of them as the business priority. Because for them to invest into various verticals is they rather plow the money back into the business. So what is being told to them that if you're coming on these e-commerce platforms, what is important for you, how you should be doing it. So we are organizing many small modules on this kind of training, and slowly we have been getting good response. A new scheme which is coming up in the ministry where we are trying to focus on the new areas where the MSMEs should be working, and cybersecurity is one of them. I am really thankful to USAID for organizing something like this, because if we were focusing last year on the digital literacy, I think this is just the right step where we need to focus on. And though COVID has brought all of us closer together, it used to take many months to organize a physical meeting, but now here I think I've never attended so many international meetings as I did in the last year. So thank you for having me here, and I wish all of us the very best, and look forward to the next session where we will be discussing about women entrepreneurship. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aurora and Mr. Satvinder. It's wonderful to hear, especially from Ms. Aurora, on all the work of the ministry. I have the pleasure now of introducing Mr. Abhishek Singh, who will be talking about cybersecurity concerns and solutions for MSMEs. Mr. Abhishek Singh serves as the CEO of India's MyGov and as President CEO of the National E-Governance Division, in addition to serving as the Managing Director and CEO of the Digital India Corporation. He has diverse experience in administration, implementing development programs, and policy formulation on technology for improving governance. Throughout his work, Mr. Singh has partnered and coordinated with numerous international organizations, including UNICEF, UKAID, and the World Health Organization. We are so grateful to welcome you, Mr. Abhishek, to the stage.
Thank you, Christy, for this introduction. It's indeed an honor and privilege to be speaking on this forum with the experts from across the world, and especially focusing on the MSME sector, which is one of the most important sectors as far as the economy is concerned, as far as creation of jobs is concerned, as far as creation of value is concerned. So in India, when we look at the MSME sector, we have more than 63 million MSMEs in place in India, and it estimated that the contribution of these MSME sector to India's GDP is of the order of almost $300 billion. So, and they are very employment centric. So they provide a lot of employment. But if you look at the impact that they have been going through, especially in the post-pandemic world, they have been impacted the most because of loss of businesses, because of lockdowns, because of inability to carry out business as normal. So government has been taking several steps to help them overcome the cash flow problems and the other challenges due to the pandemic. But over and above, what we have seen is that the pandemic has led to digital transformation in almost all sectors, and more MSMEs, as like other sectors of the economy, has adopted digital means for continuing businesses, whether it's continuing from work from home, whether it's adopting e-commerce channels for various services that they were offering. But so digital adoption in the last 18 months has been like phenomenal in almost all the sectors, and more so in the MSME sector. But when we see digital adoption, we also see that digital adoption has been accompanied by challenges of cybersecurity, by challenges of digital attacks, which would lead to loss of data, loss of fiduciary data of clients, of customers. And when that happens, MSMEs run the risk of losing the trust of their clients. So for example, if they're in an e-commerce portal which is offering services to people, and if their customers' data is stolen or exposed on the net or on the dark web or sold there, then the MSME will be sure of losing all their businesses, all their credibility. So what we need to ensure is that as and when we adopt more and more digital tools for making our work better, for reaching out to bigger markets, and for increasing our profitability, at the same time we need to be, number one, aware of what are the risks that are there, what are the various kinds of cyber attacks which come in, what are the malware that may come in, the kind of software that one should use, the kind of safe password practices that one should have, the kind of data security practices that one should adopt, and then take necessary measures for ensuring that my databases, my services, all are safe. Very often, what we have found is what we have observed is that when team members in an MSME start working from remote places, then the risk of loss of data or the risk of any cyber attack goes up. So when we are adopting remote working, then we'll have to ensure that all our team members who are logging in and out of systems remotely, they are aware of what kind of security measures they must take. Over and above the kind of scams that happen, like website spoofing, like somebody can spoof your website, there can be phishing, there can be ransomware attacks, there can be malware attacks, there can be IoT-based hacking. So all that will make the sites and make the services more vulnerable. So for that, there are various tools which are required. In India, we have been conducting cybersecurity trainings for all businesses, and with a special focus on MSMEs, in order to let them know what are the challenges and what are the solutions and where to get solutions from. The security audits have been taken have been advised for all MSMEs. The Ministry of MSME, as also the Ministry of IT, conducts as part of the cyber and information security officers training, gives them exposure to the best of the tools and best of the technologies that are available to stay safe online. Over and above, we have our dedicated cybersecurity agency, Certain, which reports all kinds of internet threats that are coming in, all kinds of malware that comes in, all kinds of attacks that comes in, and then it also gives advisories to all businesses and all people who are using technologies, internet technology especially, to the patches that they should install, the portals that they should look into, the kind of services that are being offered, and to means to stay safe on the online portals. And then to conclude, all that I would like to say is that while adoption of digital technologies does help in creating a lot of value for the businesses, but if we do not take adequate measures for ensuring our safety online and for adopting the right cybersecurity practices, it can be a big risk. So all MSMEs need to be aware of where to source help, work with partners, work with Ministry of IT, work with Certain, work with the Cyber Law Division of our ministry, get to know the best practices. And NASSCOM has a DSCI as a data security agency which helps in further imparting trainings. And once we do that, one will not only stay safe online, but one will reap the benefits of going digital, and that will help in expanding your businesses and ensuring that one is truly able to harness the benefits that come from adoption of technology. So I once again thank the organizers for this session and look forward to hearing the other specialists in this session in order to gain more insights into what all is being done for cybersecurity practices.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singh. It was wonderful to hear from you. Thank you for your highlights on MSMEs and digital. Up next, I want to invite Rama Vedashree, CEO of the Data Security Council of India, to the stage for the lightning talk. Ms. Rama Vedashree is the CEO of DSCI. Under her leadership, DSCI is pursuing a cybersecurity industry growth charter to make India into a global hub for cybersecurity and grow the industry to $35 billion by 2025. Prior to DSCI, Ms. Vedashree was Vice President at NASSCOM, leading all initiatives in domestic IT, e-governance, and smart cities, among others. At NASSCOM, she's also led the healthcare initiative in partnership with Apex health sector body, NatHealth, and the NASSCOM DSCI Cybersecurity Task Force. With a rich and varied experience of 30 plus years in the industry, she has had long stints at NIT Technologies, Microsoft, and General Electric. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Rama Vedashree.
Thank you. Can I have the slides up, please? First of all, I would like to compliment USAID and the SARDI Digital Initiative for focusing on SMBs and the cybersecurity. It's good the dialogue series has put some attention on this. What is extremely important is, already Mr. Abhishek Singh ji and Alka ma'am talked about it, how SMBs or small and medium businesses are really the wheels of the economy in India. They span various verticals, whether it is healthcare, retail, online commerce. There's a lot of food and the supply chain around that. And most importantly, manufacturing. And when you look at manufacturing, they span some of the high-tech manufacturing areas as micro, small enterprises in the entire supply chain of manufacturing. Auto also has a lot of micro, small enterprises. So they span a lot of verticals. And what we see is, particularly post-pandemic, there is an increased acceleration of their going digital. And when they're going digital, they're leveraging a lot of emerging technologies, whether it is migrating a lot of their workloads onto the cloud, leveraging online platforms, including the social media platform for commerce, integrating not only with their consumers and customers, but with their suppliers. There's a lot of AI and innovation around AI that happens. We also see a lot of micro, small entrepreneurs leveraging, developing some embedded systems in the auto sector. So there is a lot. We also see some MSMEs using 3D printing in the manufacturing. So it's not that they're just leveraging the internet technologies and online platforms for commerce. There's a lot of core digital technologies that they're leveraging or deploying internally to be able to service their consumers, or sometimes they're part of a larger supply chain. In all of this, there's a huge risk because as any emerging technology or anything that you do on digital and on the internet platforms, there are cybersecurity risks. There are targeted attacks against SMBs, whether it is the phishing attacks, whether it is, the DDoS attacks. There's so many of these attacks. And many of them, I think there was this point that was raised by the previous speakers, that whenever there is a cyber risk, it's not just reputation risk, but financial losses, particularly if you're an MSME dealing with, it's a B2C MSME dealing with consumers, any cyber risk and loss of personal data or, critical data, you pretty much see an exit of several consumers from your platform. Increasingly, given the privacy regulations worldwide and the focus on cybersecurity best practices, they also deal with a lot of compliance risks and making sure that the regulators and the nodal agencies of government, whatever guidelines they're coming up with, they conform to those guidelines and implement. So there's a lot of burden that is placed on the SMBs to be able to come up or implement cybersecurity and data protection practices. Another new threat that SMBs are facing is the entire third-party risks, because if you're a SMB in the manufacturing sector, in the electronic sector, or even healthcare sector, you deal with a lot of third-party ecosystems. Sometimes you are a third party to a larger supply chain in the manufacturing. So there is a lot of third-party risk. And typically when you look at SMB in a particular sector, now there's a lot more convergence with associated verticals or businesses or suppliers. And this convergence is also creating new risks for SMBs. So what we have done is, one of the challenges in implementing cybersecurity and privacy best practices in SMB is the founders and the management teams are so caught up in running the business, keeping the business alive and growing the business, that attention to technology and investing in cyber does become a challenge. It is a fact of life that they do have a lot of budgetary constraints. So we at DSCI developed this SMB framework. We call it the Cyber Adoption Framework. It's a tool that is there on our website. Anybody can do self-assessment around that. I've already shared the link in the chat. The way we have done this cyber adoption framework is, when you look at MSMEs or SMBs, they're of different size. They're so diverse now and they're so fragmented. They're of different size and league. Some of them are a little more mature and some of them are very early adopters of technology. So we looked at the SMBs as base, progressive and advanced, and they can do a self-assessment of their digital risk quotient. So if you are an advanced enterprise, advanced user of digital technologies, you're doing something on cloud, you're leveraging some solutions which are built on AI, or you're doing a lot on the mobile and the cloud platform. So we looked at 3 parameters. One is base and a progressive SMB and a advanced SMB. Look at the digital risk quotient. And then we looked at how can we give them a framework, because we cannot expect an SMB to do everything comprehensive like a large bank or a large telco. They need to do it in phases based on what their digital risk quotient is. So we came up with the security controls and recommendations. In the interest of time, I'll go to the last slide where we actually have all the 3 users, what is there in blue, what is there in yellow, and the gray, I think, where we are saying that if you are an advanced user, you should give a lot of focus on whether it is identity access management, cloud security, supply chain risks or third-party risks, the contract risk when you are hiring a service provider. Whereas if you're a base user for digital technologies, what is it that you need to do in terms of password protection, user awareness, workforce, getting some capacity building and awareness programs for your workforce and your partner organizations. So we've come up with a very graded assess your digital quotient risk, and then implement the cybersecurity based on you're an advanced user or a base user of digital technologies. So this is like a toolkit or a guide. And then, of course, there is a very large industry ecosystem of service providers and product companies which can implement this. Nodal agencies like CERT have provided a lot of tools. We have done a lot of awareness campaigns, and there is content on our website, including Mr. Abhishek Singh talked about work from home. There are advisories that we have published on the DSCA website for IT admins, which even an SMB IT admin can look at it on what controls they have to implement. If I'm an employee of an SMB, micro, small enterprise, and I'm working from home, or I'm working from a remote plant, what is the care I should take? So there are those advisories which can be leveraged by the workforce. But this tool that we have developed is something where we urge the management teams of MSMEs to leverage this, do a self-assessment, and understand the risk, and come up with a roadmap which you might do in a phased manner, because I do understand that everything can't be done at one shot in a micro small enterprise. So I will stop here. We do have several other awareness campaigns. Why it is extremely important to protect the SMB systems, and is because most of them are now leveraging technology. They're going online, they're leveraging cloud, and most importantly, they're integrating with digital payments providers, they're integrating with the UPI stack, they're integrating with cloud and social media platforms to be able to reach out to consumers. So I think stepping up the cybersecurity awareness at a workforce level of SMB and the management and founders is extremely important. We'll be very happy to support USAID and DAI and the SARDI initiative to be able to do more on this front.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vedastri, for that informative presentation. And thank you also for the resources that you shared in the chat. I encourage everybody to look at those resources from DSCI. As we move on to our next section of the webinar, you'll notice that there will also be a poll popping up under the polls tab of your chat. That's a multi-choice poll. We encourage you to click on an answer there. And with that, I would like to bring Rashmi Rumta, our change management expert with Trioka Technologies, and Junaid Usmani, director of Trioka Technologies, to the stage to introduce our panel of speakers.
Thank you, Christy. So we have all heard our eminent speakers who have already set the stage of the various dangers that exist in the digital world today, and how cyber attackers and criminals are exploiting these vulnerabilities in our infrastructure and systems, which is actually placing a national threat on the economy, safety, as well as the businesses under which the MSMEs are operating. So in this panel discussion around cybersecurity concerns and solutions for MSMEs, we will explore the cybersecurity landscape for the MSMEs, the cybersecurity risks that are prevailing, and we'll also discuss on some mechanisms, regulations, and solutions that would be effective in minimizing these cyber threats. Now, joining us on this panel, we have Mr. Gautam Kapoor, who is the... So joining us on the panel, we have Mr. Gautam Kapoor. He's a partner in Deloitte India's Cybersecurity and Risk Advisory Practice. He's also the national leader on digital identity and identity access management service practice for Deloitte India. He has worked on cybersecurity projects in India, Singapore, China, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Thailand, Philippines, and South Korea. Gautam holds a bachelor degree in mechanical engineering and master's in business administration. Another member that we have on our panel is Mr. Kapil Gupta. So Mr. Kapil Gupta is a co-founder at Volon Cybersecurity, which specializes in cyber threat intelligence products and solutions. Prior to founding Volon, Mr. Gupta worked at Capgemini in Stockholm, Sweden, as well as with Ernst & Young and GE Capital in the United States. Kapil studied in the London's Business School and is also a qualified chartered accountant. We have another panelist, Ms. Vishi Bindra. She serves as a director of cybersecurity services for KPMG in the United States. She specializes in cloud security, controls transformation, and cyber governance, and has experience building and testing security for large complex networks. She holds a bachelor's degree in engineering from Institute of Electronics and Telecom Engineers. We have Mr. Sameer also with us. He's a Director, Foundation, Futuristic Technologies, as well as founder and CEO of ForensicsGuru.com and President of Digital Investigators Associations. He has experience of working in United States, UK, and India. He's a TEDx speaker and an author of Learning Network Forensics. He holds a bachelor's degree in engineering from the National Institute of Technology at Rourkela and studied in IIT Kanpur as well as Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. We have Mr. Vaidyanath Iyer, who is the Chief of Operation for IBM's Security Command Center. He has experience in IT sales, marketing, and training. He holds a master's degree from New York Institute of Technology. Finally, we have Mr. Lalit Kumar, who is a security architect for Amazon Web Services in India, where he supports AWS customers to improve their security, risk management, and compliances in the cloud. Prior to joining AWS, he worked on multiple cloud initiatives for the Government of India. He holds a bachelor's degree from the Bharati Vidyapeeth University. So it's my pleasure to have you all on the discussion this evening. So now we will open the discussion with that. I would like to turn over to Mr. Gautam to begin our dialogue through opening statements about the current cybersecurity landscape for MSMEs and the inherent risks, and what measures need to be adopted by MSMEs to stay updated on the cyber threats. Yeah, Mr. Gautam Kapoor. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Junaid. Thank you for hosting us as well. Pleasure to be here. As you heard a lot of the speakers before we started the panel, MSME sector is one of the sectors which is highly vulnerable. They have adopted a lot of digitization in the last few years. Many of them have adopted or moved into cloud and have also adopted various digital platforms, be it financial services platforms or digitization in the payment space. Integrating with UPI and things like that. So they've all enhanced their digital footprint in the past few years, and of course the pandemic has only enhanced their digitization and their the way they were usually working. Many of them have also launched e-commerce websites because they wanted to obviously source their orders. And that has also obviously enhanced their overall, digital footprints. As you know, every digital footprint comes with its vulnerability. There is nothing which is called as a secure system or 100% secure system. So every digital or every code can have bugs and vulnerabilities which can be exploited. And of course, MSME sectors have always had risk factors. Because they've been concentrating on business priorities, they want to just grow. Business is their focus. They don't have, proper capital, proper resources, and in many cases, very little understanding of really the cyber, risks. And that, exponentially increases their overall cyber, risk or threats to the organization. So it's like a low-hanging fruit for attackers, and they would really want to, pick on them. We've seen that. We've seen experiences where in the MSME sectors, there have been email security breaches, there is phishing attacks which has happened. And because of lack of understanding of how the attack actually happened, people have lost money as well. So there's been a lot of cyber crimes which have happened in this MSME sector where, payment authorization has happened to a certain vendor which was not supposed to happen, and so on and so forth, right? You've read about that in the newspapers as well. So, a lot of it is primarily due to lack of understanding of how attack actually happens. From a remediation perspective, I was trying to put together what are the things which MSME sectors can put together, and I came up with what I'm calling it as 7 habits of a cyber aware MSME sectors, right? So a few pointers. One, for all our colleagues here who are in MSME, the first is know your crown jewel. Know which is the asset which you want to protect. Fundamental. Whether it is data, whether it is intellectual property, whether it is a product or an asset, you should be aware this is the technology, process, system, data which I need to protect. Fundamental, number one aspect. The second aspect, and we've spoken about that, awareness. Be aware of certain cyber crimes and cyber risk. Like, how does a phishing actually happen? How does a ransomware happen? Do not click on unsolicited email links. Those are fundamental today in any scenario. And so so everybody in the organization should be basically aware of known cyber risks in a digital world, right? So that's number two. Adopt a concept which I call it as never trust, always verify. Very important concepts, and everything which you do, always verify. Don't trust anything which is there on the internet. Fourthly, adopt multi-factor authentication, whether that's your personal email accounts, whether they're official email accounts or your cloud adoption, any particular application authentication, have multi-factor authentication. Fifth one is use strong passwords. I found so many of us not using stronger passwords to authenticate. Our passwords could be, in many cases, it is password at the rate of 123, the most used password in the world. Do not use simple passwords. Do not use your date of birth. Do not use your name. Do not use numbers which are known to the world in your password. They can be easily cracked. Back up your data is the sixth one. With ransomware around, make sure you have thorough data backup in your for your assets and data. And lastly, do vulnerability analysis and patch. Patching your system is another important element that will help remove a lot of the attacks.
Thank you, Mr. Gautam, for providing the details on the landscape. My next question is to Kapil. With the increasing online engagements, there are more and more cyber threat actors that are pouncing on the vulnerabilities. Could you throw some light on the different type of threat actors that may invade MSMEs and what needs to be done to keep them at bay?
Sure, Rashmi. First of all, thanks for having me for this discussion. I hope you can all hear me fine.
We can hear you fine. Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Fine. So I think when we talk about MSME, our observation is that from a threat landscape perspective, MSME are no different when we compare them against the enterprise organizations. And when I say enterprise, I'm essentially talking about very large scale organization. But I think where the real problem starts is that MSME are less prepared to deal with the cyber attacks compared to that of a very large scale enterprises. I think that's where in an event of any cyber attack or cyber breach, the outcome is generally catastrophic for an MSME versus that of a large scale enterprises. So that's obviously sort of one point I wanted to just make. And I think as an organization that specializes and delivers the threat intelligence, what we see is a very, very scary picture. Our observations sort of confirm to the point that the extent of cyber attacks and threats are significantly higher compared to what's generally known in the public domain. And when I say public domain, I'm actually referring to the cyber domain. Where the things have practically exploded because now the threat landscape is a lot bigger, it's a lot deeper than ever before. The attacks are not carried by humans. They're essentially bots who are actually carrying out these attacks. And to make it worse, I think since the start of COVID, the work from home has further accentuated the problems. Specifically, if we really talk about, before I talk about, what we are seeing these days in terms of the latest type of attacks, let's just sort of take a quick recap of, what are the traditionally, what organizations have done in order to secure their networks, etc. So normally speaking, traditionally organizations use what's known as perimeter protection, asset protection, data protection, and essentially, the application of standards and pretty much, doing all kinds of compliance. But what has actually happened since the start of COVID? Obviously, one thing is very obvious that organizations have not necessarily been able to replicate the same level of security as they would be otherwise able to do when employees would come into their office premises. So what's happening is that a lot of employees who are working remotely are using their personal devices for official uses. Or sensitive data is being actually handled outside of the organization boundaries. Software codes that are being developed are being shared openly on on these repositories. And essentially speaking, it's essentially the nature of the distributed network which is making it very, very difficult to organizations to, do with any kind of a, deal with any kind of a compliance. And I think the situation is all the more severe, particularly in the case of MSME, because, they have very limited resources. And particularly when it comes to IT security, their pockets are not very, very deep down. So effectively speaking, if I have to just talk a bit about, the nature of threats, we would often categorize them into two types. One is the opportunistic threats, where you could potentially be looking at things like ransomware, data breaches, or maybe campaigns where essentially the objective is to make money. These are essentially criminal activities in nature, where these threat actors are essentially looking at making money. On the other hand, there are also we are also seeing a very significantly higher number of targeted attacks. These targeted attacks are actually originating from North Korea, even Russia, even China, and even countries like Pakistan. Plenty of APT groups, who are sort of openly conducting these attacks. Third, and the most important vector, which I think is often being overlooked, particularly in the MSME community, is that there are a lot of targeted attacks that are actually happening on the technology enablers. And who are these technology enablers? I am actually referring to the VPN vendors, the code repositories, collaboration providers, the Microsoft Office type of tools. Now we need to understand for a moment that essentially these are the collaboration, these are the technology platforms which are actually the backbone of the organizations today. Particularly when employees are actually working from home. And these are the sort of, these are the kind of technology players who are becoming the target. So when you actually hit a VPN, then it is not necessarily affecting one particular organization, but it is actually affecting a significant range of organizations. Specifically on the infrastructure side, we are seeing massive exploitation of RDP servers, SMB services, which are essentially the backbone of remote working, file sharing. We are seeing a lot of brute force attacks on SSN. We are seeing a lot of attacks on VPN services, so on and so forth. So I think, all in all, what I'm saying is I think, the landscape is much broader, much deeper. And MSME is actually pretty much at a point where, God forbid, if they are hit by a cyber attack, then it really becomes very difficult for them to overcome, unlike a very large scale enterprises. Rashmi.
Rashmi, you're on mute.
So, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Kapil. My next question will be to Vishy, who's a director in KPMG US. So, Vishy, since cyber criminals are a resourceful lot and waiting for kind of any opportunity to find loopholes in the networks, so could you suggest any mechanism, procedures for MSMEs to kind of proactively prepare themselves for these attacks and thwart these criminals from impacting their enterprise? This also kind of points to a question which was asked in the audience about, do we have any tool which can be used to avoid phishing attacks in general? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rashmi, and thanks for having me in this panel discussion. I really appreciate the topic because we heard from various speakers and my other fellow panelists that cybersecurity is really becoming a topic where we are getting these continuous hacks and hearing about all these breaches. Now, business today are undergoing this rapid transformation, adopting new technology-driven ways of working. They're going through, digital transformation, cloud adoption, automation, etc. So while technology modernization, enables the organization for better customer experience and service delivery, it also expands the security threat landscape, and we heard from everyone. Now, taking the right security measures and being alert and aware when connected are the key ways to prevent these cyber intrusions and online crimes. Now, Mr. Kapil Gupta made a very good point that SMEs are no different than any large organization where these breaches are happening. Mainly, if you see, we had in last 18 months or so, the Capital One breach, which was hacker taking advantage of misconfigured firewall that granted excessive permission on the server, or the SolarWinds, which was supply chain attack. It was a global hack. Threat actors turned their Orion software into weapon, gaining access to several government systems and thousands of private systems around the world. Or recently, we've heard of the T-Mobile data breach, which is a reminder that bad actors can use the dormant, unused accounts and use it for criminal activities. So the challenge is, not only putting in the controls, but really to understand what is the intention of these hackers, what they are doing, how they are doing, and why they are doing. So they're continuously exploiting the vulnerabilities to gain access, and you really need to understand the technology you use. You need to understand the risk these technologies bring in and implement controls to protect it. So if we look at the stats, cost of data breach, the global cost of data breach on an average is around 3.9 million, which means, bigger organizations, while they can handle it, but, MSMEs, if they get hit by some breach and they have to deal with it, I heard that remark, which was made by, our speakers, that MSMEs will be practically out of business if these levels of breaches happen. So what do we do in terms of protecting ourselves? So during the pandemic, as the use of cloud has gone up by 8 times, organizations have adopted newer ways of data protection. Usage of capabilities are also changing. So data security control should be the primary concern, because you're trying to protect your data mainly. And the danger be of data leakage due to security misconfigurations or insufficient access controls. So we heard some of the controls that Mr. Gautam Kapoor talked of already when he talked of some leading practices there. But in order to prepare proactively for the cyber attacks, you need to have layered security. You need to know your assets, where your crown jewels are. And once you know what the exposure is to those assets, you can really improve the threat management capabilities within your organization. So to think through, you need to have that, you think of layer 1 being the data protection domains, which starts with identity management, mainly authentication and authorization controls, privileged access management, the MFA, which is multi-factor authentication. You should think through of your encryption and cryptography controls, where you are thinking of data obfuscation, tokenization, anonymization. You need to think through of configuration hardening, because those are some of the easy breakthroughs that hackers use. You need to think of controls around your boundaries so that you can tighten security around that boundary. These days, you're also, considering hearing the concept of zero trust, where it says you verify explicitly who is accessing the assets. You authenticate and authorize those. You use the principle of least privilege all the time. And then you assume breach. You think that there's a breach happening all the time. So you verify that end-to-end encryption is there. You use analytics to get visibility to what's happening in your environment. And then you drive threat detection and improve your defense around it. So ultimately, it's the proactive continuous monitoring through user behavior analytics. It is the combination of preventive, detective, and monitoring controls. So in summary, you need to secure the operations through strong preventive controls, configuration and network hardening, continuous monitoring controls, and detection capabilities. So in terms of tools, there's not one tool that will give you everything. You need to know your entire landscape and then think through in a layered approach how you can really protect your assets and data, which is critical.
Thank you, Vishy. Now, I have a specific question, maybe for Samir. Samir, when we talk about various challenges that are existing in cyber attacks, cyber threats, and the solutions that are around it, what does an MSME need to do if he's actually under a cyber attack, or the cyber attack has already happened in his place? What steps does he need to take, and how does he ensure that in future he is safe from these kind of attacks that happen?
It's a great question. Thank you, Junaid. You see, I have spent sites on both sides of the fence. I've been, I've worked with corporates, and the last 25 odd years, I've been, on the MSME side. And the MSME is essentially, a soft and squishy target. The trouble is that, most MSMEs are not very IT enabled. I mean, COVID has pushed IT enablement. COVID has made these, people pull up their socks and dive in head first, but they've dived in blindly. Quite honestly, all of these, the MSMEs, they face a lot of challenges. I call them the ABC, The first is awareness. MSMEs are blind. Most of them, especially those in the manufacturing side, people who are, part of very large supply chains. There would be people even supplying, organizations like ISRO or whatever, throughout South Asia. And I interact with people in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, and Nepal. And I have found that most of these people are definitely not cyber savvy. In fact, before cyber savvy comes IT savviness, and a lot of the MSME owners are not IT savvy. So the key is they've adopted IT technology and they really don't know how to secure themselves. So the first A of the ABC is the awareness part. They really need to, upgrade themselves from that as perspective. The second is the behavior part. Yeah, the owners of these MSMEs, they believe that it's not going to happen to me, It's actually security by obscurity. Who's going to bother about a small organization like mine? That's the thought process that's going around in people's head. So they're looking at, hey, it's not going to happen to me. It's going to happen to the next guy. And when it happens to them, they are flabbergasted. They just don't know what to do. So essentially, the third thing is the C part, the connectivity, where I feel that they need to look at their connections to the outside world. Now, e-commerce supplier, they've got two computers. The owner has his own laptop. The organization is just running on two computers. One is handling stocks and one is handling dispatches. All they've got is a warehouse. Material comes in, they pack it and ship it out. That's it. Day in, day out, day in, day out. They're hit by a ransomware. The business goes belly up because they just don't know what to do, and they're really not prepared. They're probably not heard of backups, so they take backups. They don't have time. They're focused on getting the goods out. So things are really they go into crisis mode. So essentially, my thoughts are that how can these guys take care of a thing like this? A lot of these people are not able or not even capable, or let's put it this way, that maybe they don't have the will, they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the knowledge to do a thing like this. So when we are looking at a situation like this, some part of it has to be done for them by providers who have an integrated solution. One of the great things I've seen which protects these people from phishing attacks and viruses and things that come over email is just shifting to something as simple as Gmail, or the Google Suite. I mean, when people go and you start using this, MSMEs are very largely protected because Google as an organization is putting in a lot of effort to take care of malware that is out there that's being shipped via things like email and the phishing emails, for example. So this is one thing that definitely MSMEs should be looking at. The other thing is the awareness part. and the awareness should be, targeted both at the owners and the employees. But the owners come first. The moment they realize the gravity of the situation, and this is going to bring in that behavior change. And once we have that, we're going to begin to see, the awareness spreading down throughout the organization. If the owner says no, it doesn't matter, skip this process and just get the goods out of the door, then obviously the employees are going to have the same kind of things, So, these are some of the aspects that I feel that MSMEs need to, bring into the picture, and how to, prevent cyber attacks from happening. I think this could, we could talk about this for hours, because there's lots that needs to be done. But definitely, first steps, baby steps, but then we need to get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dutt. That was really insightful. My next question is for Mr. Iyer. The present COVID times have forced various enterprises to go online and use internet, and especially cloud infrastructure. They're all moving, like even large organizations are moving from on-premise to, kind of hybrid solutions, or even the cloud solutions. So could you provide a brief overview for our audiences on different types of cloud solutions that are available to MSMEs, and how they can decide what best suits their needs? Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Good evening. Good evening to everyone here and my co-panelists. Very interesting discussion I've been observing. I think, every discussion, how many ever years you spend on security, you keep learning something all the time. Excellent. Now, it's a very interesting question. Is there a cloud solution which is ideal for MSME? Right? If you look at the panel discussion which has been happening, right? MSME, the nature of business, the size of the business may be different. Their stage at the businesses will be different. The threat landscape is not that different. Right? Overall threat vectors are not different. But yes, they can be targeted easily, because they are not IT savvy. And you'll be surprised, some of the large enterprises themselves are not that IT savvy either, right? Because the weakest, the problem is the weakest link in your system, which is the weakest employee who doesn't follow the process. As you rightly said, I would say enterprises, MSMEs are not moving to cloud. If you're an MSME, and if I'm an MSME, right, Samir said he's on the side of the MSME, so he would know it much better. They would start with cloud. Why would they invest? Because it's a stand-up business. We need to start developing the business. So let's look at it from a business point of view. The owner of MSME, the promoters of MSME, who have gathered funds, what's that? They want to start running from day one. They need to start bringing in cash, right? They're burning cash from day one. So they need to bring in cash. So they will do IT what is adequate. Now, if they could do without IT, they would do that. But unfortunately, or incidentally, they can't do it. So they bring in IT. And what is to be done is you need to start, and I know a lot of MSMEs who actually start with the cloud, and they start with public cloud. Because as you rightly said, some of the public clouds, and not some of them, almost all of them, the major players which are there, they have very established standards. But, we talked about 7 habits that Gautam spoke about. I heard what Madam Vishy said here on the readiness, how they should be. So it's difficult to be ready. So what we need to do is develop a data-centric security. You talked about crown jewels, right? So you need to understand in data-centric security, keep the data which is absolutely important for you, which should be with you. So it's definitely going to be hybrid, right? It's definitely going to be hybrid, but majority of that is going to be initially on the public cloud. And that's how it is going to happen. If it works out, they will continue to say, so what do they have to keep? They have to keep storage. Their storage will be in cloud. What they need to have on their premise nearby, if I could say near the, on the edges, is how fast they can recover the data if there is an attack. Of course, you can't rely 100% on the public cloud's security provider, because there are SLA bounds and there are legal frameworks. It's highly debatable in the country right now to what extent you can hold a service provider accountable for a breach on your system, because at the end of the day, they will say the enterprise is culpable. So it's important for you to have a data recovery, which means it's definitely going to be a hybrid setup. You put the initial stuff. For example, you can put your business suites. You can put things which things which are like, even today ERPs are also available on cloud, right? You can actually do it as a service provider rather than implementing a large humongous ERP in your system. So you can't do that as an MSME. So you can have ERPs in the system, in the cloud, but your sensitive data should always be there with you, and you should also have a mechanism. So it's going to be a hybrid cloud. I'm not going to pick up any vendor here. I myself come from a vendor. I'm going to be vendor agnostic here. So what we need to do is select any of the public clouds. All of them are highly capable. Understand the legal angles. I know the bill is still in consideration. It's being debated, but understand what are the legal implications of a data loss. One thing which is very important is, what does MSME do as a business? MSME is actually a supplier to many large enterprises, and it is not one size fits all. Where are the MSMEs? They could be in financial, they could be in energy, they could be in healthcare, for all you know, right? And they could be in critical infrastructure. They could be, supplying nuclear or highly sensitive information. They're supplying, somebody mentioned about supplying to ISRO. ISRO, right? They could be supplying to ISRO, NASA, whatever it is, right? So there are other implications. So you cannot have a one size fits all. You can have certain generic policies which are there, but each one of the MSMEs have to look at their business model, their customers, and their customers, many of them are B2B. So their customers are important. Their security policies are extremely important for you. You need to make sure that those security policies reflect in your organization. For example, if I am a financial MSME and I'm, my customers, or I'm interacting with a lot of the large financial institutions across the world, I need to understand what are the financial regulations. Am I including in that? So in the cloud, the provider which provides me, public cloud which provides me for those kind of solutions, is what is required. Most of the cloud providers have CSPMs, right, which are available over there. Evaluate them, use them. The most important thing is readiness, cyber readiness, right? While you can use any cloud, right? Cloud is like a road. It's a facility, right? You have to use the facility, but if I don't drive the car safely, I have myself to blame, not the road. So readiness is extremely important. We call it as train as well as you fight, or as good as you fight. There is no use. The question was asked to Samir, and I could see him smiling. What happens when an attack has happened, right? It's a very difficult question for all of us practitioners. You already have an attack, right? Now you are doing things post facto. What you need to do is, how do you prevent the attack? I mean, how do you make sure? But let me tell you, everybody mentioned about the pandemic, people going remote, etc. Yes, it has given us, moved us to a completely different paradigm. We are more into cloud today, and all of us are taking it. All of us today in this session, we are all in cloud. We are talking on the cloud. Whether we like it or not, we are on the cloud. Right? But whether the pandemic, hopefully we are probably coming towards the end of the pandemic, but those cyber threats are not going away. Pandemic will vanish. At one point of time, we will get out of the pandemic, but the cyber threats are not going to vanish. Like the phishings, the ransomware, the malware attacks, social engineering, open source intelligence. And that's one thing which you have a problem when you go to cloud. We call it OSINT, right? We can get, I don't know whether, for example, people will use, when you use cloud applications, it's very relevant. For example, if I'm a biker or a cycler or a trekker, I will also use applications like Strava, right? Which I can have it, and it tracks my fitness schemes which I run. What happens is, it also, and this happened literally in a military setup, I don't want to mention the country, where the soldiers were using, they were on the cloud, they were using Strava, and the Strava highlights all the places that you go, which means an enemy nation can literally pick up those points where they are cycling within the defense setup. I'm just taking defense as an example. In IBM, we conduct exercises which actually tells you how you can literally get in and understand who's your neighbor. And we can even understand when you go out of your house, when you don't come back. So hackers are very intelligent. They're very evolving. whether they are bots doing it, people doing it, they only do it for one reason: financial benefits. Right? Of course, we have nation state actors, so-called nation state actors. At the end of the day, it's still financial. It is still some other goals, political goals to be scored. So MSME is the weakest link, because if I crack an MSME, we can get into the larger enterprises. If I'm not able to get into the enterprises faster, we can get into the large enterprises through the MSME. So the answer is, use a standard public cloud for all your initial setups. Definitely develop a policy. One good thing is, as you engage with the standard cloud, be it any cloud, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM, take any of the clouds, you will see some best practices. You can imbibe those best practices onto your on-prem and have a small on-prem setup for very, very critical data, and have a hybrid cloud, and then implement zero trust, implement things like XDR, right? Implement things like cyber awareness, keep training. And the one person who has to be actually trained is at the top of the pyramid, right? That's a person who doesn't get trained at all. And that's a person who doesn't believe that he or she needs the training. So train the person, because I can tell you, social engineering has happened on CEOs, CFOs of large organizations, using this they have lost millions of dollars, right? And it happened right here in India. We have seen that. So it is very important for the MSME to imbibe those cultures, go with hybrid, make sure that your basic things are on the public cloud, your sensitive things are on-prem, and then link it up. But there, implement zero trust. Even when you're dealing, sign up a very, very clear SLA with your cloud provider. That is important.
Thank you, Mr. Iyer. And the overall discussion is so engaging. We are actually running lots of time. So I have one small question for Mr. Lalit, and that's basically one of the myths that most of the MSMEs and people around the world generally have is my data, my application safe on the cloud or not? So if you can get a clarity to the MSMEs, how the safety at the cloud level is maintained, and they don't need to worry about any of the data. And I also believe that all the industry players, whether it is IBM or Amazon, they have in this pandemic created some MSME suits around the entire solution portfolio. So is cybersecurity part of that solution portfolio? So I think if Mr. Lalit can answer that, and maybe others can also pitch in, so that MSMEs can actually understand the safety and the pocket friendliness of implementing cybersecurity at their end.
Thank you. This has been a very engaging discussion. And the question about data, that's the most often asked question. The question is, who owns the data? Data is always owned by the customer, the MSME or enterprise who puts the data. So this data is always under the control of customer. Now, what does that mean? That means that you could define where your data will be stored, how your data will be processed, and that's the standard across the major cloud vendors. The way we see how initial compromise happens, and I have analyzed data for all the major compromise which has happened. Now, there are only 5 kind of things that leads to initial compromise: security misconfiguration, unpatched vulnerabilities, weak and leaked stolen password, social engineering, and insider threat. However, in all these 5, the topmost is security misconfiguration. It's unlikely that a state actor or a hacker is trying to, a determined hacker will do that, but largely due to the misconfiguration, and it's not humans, it's the machine. It could be the script kiddie who are scanning the network, and they're looking for vulnerable configurations, and they're just leveraging those misconfigurations, and then sending malware and ransomware attack. Those kind of things are happening. Security's core job is to help run the system as intended and only as intended. That's the core role if we ignore the formal definition of security. Now, to do this, there primarily 2 kind of things. One is detective controls and preventive controls. And no surprises, I do see even with large organization, there is a very less investment in preventive control. And to the surprise, preventive controls often comes free of cost. Preventive controls are understanding what is your normal behavior. What you don't do, for example, in cloud, you don't utilize a region outside India if you're based out of India. You block everything else. You do not use certain kind of services. You block them completely. So you can't actually utilize those. In your organization, it's required that everyone, preventive control is, no one can log in without MFA. As simple as that. And what does it take? Does it take any kind of a special solution? No, it's a simple policy that you deploy. So preventive controls, as we call them, the guardrails, are the ones which can be configured without burning any money. And that's where I see the least amount of investment. That's where one need to think more and more about it. Then the second one is detective control. A lot of solutions, and I often call this that solutions are seductive in nature. Rather than solution, we have to reanalyze the problem. We have to look deeper into the problem. Detective control you can only apply once you know what is your normal behavior. Otherwise, your detective control will not work. And what will you do if you got an alert? For example, if one of your endpoint, your laptop, mobile, have an alert for, let's say, a malware, how do you going to protect against it? What if you got an alert? What if you got a threat intel? After that, how does you operate? Is it a manual action, or are you going to automate it? The only thing we have to consider now is what percentage can we automate? And what we are automating, can this be part of my preventive controls? So that I keep on increasing my guardrails that, hey, this is not my normal behavior. So I need to know first, what is my normal behavior? How my normal business looks like? What is my intended behavior? And then we can proceed further. There are multiple solutions on this, but very briefly, 3-4 things that one should keep in mind is inventory. Know what your assets are. And once you know the inventory, you always know what are your crown jewels out of that. Second is backup. Always back up your crown jewel. Don't be the guy who just make a copy of a data, copy of a copy of a copy. Like we just keep storing everything multiple times, and then we don't know where to find what, rather than our crown jewels. Multi-factor authentication and encrypt everything. And the major one is don't run with defaults. The default passwords, Apache web server, the default password, default settings. Don't run with those default. Yep. Yeah, that's it. Any comments, question are welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, all the panel speakers. It was great to have you. It has been a wonderful session, and there is a lot that actually we have also learned, and all the MSMEs which are part of the audience would have been an eye-opener for this, though we would have liked to engage more on this, but considering the time that we have in hand, thanks again. Thanks a lot. I would request Christy to take over now.
Thank you so much, Junaid, Rashmi, and our wonderful panel. That was a wealth of information that was shared, and we have a lot of really good questions from the audience as well. And we will plan to follow up on those questions after the webinar, since we didn't have a chance to get to them all during the panel today. At this point, I will introduce our closing speaker, Harry Chris, the General Development Officer within USAID Indo-Pacific Office. He focuses on increasing trade and investment, leveraging emerging technologies, and improving regulatory environments. Prior to joining USAID, he worked in the private sector in a variety of roles, including mergers and acquisitions, investment banker, corporate positions in finance and marketing. Thank you, Harry, for closing us off.
Thank you very much, Christy. And I want to thank all of our panelists today. They shared such great information. Just to recap some of the highlights. So with growing digitalization globally, micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs, are more vulnerable to cyber attacks than ever. Why? Because they're easy targets. big businesses, corporations, and banks have the money and infrastructure available to put together a dedicated cybersecurity team, and that's not often the case with MSMEs. MSMEs were hit particularly hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. As working remotely has increased, so have the number of cyber attacks. MSMEs can easily lose the trust of their clients due to cyber attacks. And so having that training, that knowledge of what to do and how to do it is more important than ever. Some great insights from the panelists, some 7 habits of cybersecurity: know the assets you want to protect, be aware of cyber crimes and threats, never trust, always verify, adopt multi-factor authentication, use strong passwords, back up your data, batch your systems. And, there are several types of threats out there. There are opportunistic threats, the ransomware, data breaches, there are targeted attacks. This could be coming in from criminal organizations or state actors. And then there are also attacks on the technology enablers themselves, the VPN providers, the cloud solution providers. And so you really need to understand the technology you're using as an MSME and the associated risks. Data control should be one of your primary functions, and adopting a layered security approach. So really you need to have awareness by the owners and the employees. You need to have the right behaviors within the organization. So security by obscurity is not enough anymore. Just because you're small, you're not out of the target, off the X. And then finally, third is connectivity. Review how you're connected to the outside world and whether or not you're taking a data-centric approach where you have the correct data that you need close to you and other information stored on the cloud as it makes sense for your organization. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And, I think there's an old saying, which is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that definitely applies to cybersecurity. So once again, I just want to thank everyone for their participation today. We will try to make sure we answer all the questions that we have received. And once again, thank you so much to all of the panelists. And with that, I turn it back over to Christy.
Thank you, Harry. With that, we want to thank everyone again for being part of our event today, and we look forward to seeing you next week at our connectivity event. Thank you so much.